by JOSEPH KRAUSS Associated PressIsrael's parliament approved a new coalition government on Sunday that sent Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu into the opposition after a record 12 years in office and a political crisis that sparked 4 elections in 2 years. Naftali Bennett, the head of a small ultranationalist party, was sworn in as Prime Minister after a narrow 60-59 vote in parliament. But if he wants to keep the job, he will have to maintain an unwieldy coalition of parties from the political right, left and center. The 8 parties, including a small Arab faction that is making history by sitting in the ruling coalition, are united in their opposition to Netanyahu and new elections but agree on little else. They are likely to pursue a modest agenda that seeks to reduce tensions with the Palestinians and maintain good relations with the US without launching any major initiatives. Netanyahu sat silently during the vote. After it was approved, he stood up to leave the chamber, before turning around and shaking Bennett's hand. A dejected Netanyahu, wearing a black medical mask, briefly sat in the opposition leader's chair before walking out. Netanyahu, who is on trial for corruption, remains the head of the largest party in parliament and is expected to vigorously oppose the new government. If just one faction bolts, it could lose its majority and would be at risk of collapse, giving him an opening to return to power. The country's deep divisions were on vivid display as Bennett addressed Parliament ahead of the vote. He was repeatedly interrupted and loudly heckled by supporters of Netanyahu, several of whom were escorted out of the chamber. Bennett's speech mostly dwelled on domestic issues, but he expressed opposition to U.S. efforts to revive Iran's nuclear deal with world powers. Israel will not allow Iran to arm itself with nuclear weapons, Bennett said, vowing to maintain Netanyahu's confrontational policy. Israel will not be a party to the agreement and will continue to preserve full freedom of action. Bennett nevertheless thanked President Joe Biden and the U.S. for its decades of support for Israel. Netanyahu, speaking after him, vowed to return to power. He predicted the incoming government would be weak on Iran and give in to U.S. demands to make concessions to the Palestinians. If it is destined for us to be in the opposition, we will do it with our backs straight until we topple this dangerous government and return to lead the country in our way, he said. Yohanan Plesner, president of the Israel Democracy Institute, a nonpartisan think tank, said the new government will likely be more stable than it appears. Even though it has a very narrow majority, it will be very difficult to topple and replace because the opposition is not cohesive, he said. Each party in the coalition will want to prove that it can deliver, and for that they need time and achievements.